What is good, basketball family? It is your boy Dre Fiver back at it again on Street Hoops, the only place on the entire internet that gives you the raw, unfiltered, completely no-nonsense truth about what is really going down on the hardwood. And today, we have to talk about a situation that is absolutely detonating right before our very eyes. A situation so toxic and so volatile that it threatens to completely permanently alter the landscape of the WNBA as we know it. The clip you just saw at the start of this video is not a drill. That is not some out-of-context, heat-of-the-moment little disagreement that a coach and a star player are going to laugh about in the locker room over ice packs and Gatorade. No, sir. What you just witnessed is the exact, definitive moment the Indiana Fever's entire franchise foundation cracked right down the middle, splintering into a million pieces on national television. We are looking at a code red, folks. Caitlin Clark, the absolute face of the franchise, the face of the entire league, the generational player who literally printed money for this organization and shifted the entire paradigm of women's basketball globally, was just benched. And she wasn't just benched for a veteran defensive specialist to close out a tight quarter. She was benched for second-year guard Raven Johnson. Yeah, I need you to really let that sink in for a minute. The exact same Raven Johnson that Caitlin Clark notoriously and humiliatingly waved off back in the 2023 NCAA Final Four. The disrespect was astronomical back then, and the absolute irony of this moment is absolutely deafening right now. I am telling you, this is not a surprise to anyone who has been paying close attention to the body language, the subliminal press conference shots, and the sideline interactions over the last 4 games. The days are numbered for either Stephanie White or Caitlin Clark in an Indiana Fever uniform. One of them is going to be gone. And frankly, I think a lot of you casual fans and mainstream media pundits are going to be completely shocked at who the front office actually chooses to keep. So buckle up, make sure you smash that like button right now, because we are diving deep into the ugliest, most dramatic locker room war in professional basketball today. Let me set the stage for you, because to truly understand why Stephanie White is snapping at Caitlin Clark in the middle of a blowout loss against a brand new expansion team like the Portland Fire, you have to understand the deeply toxic dynamic that has been brewing beneath the surface all season long. Stephanie White has built a rock-solid reputation in this league as a miracle worker, a brilliant tactician who does not care about your star status. She is a gritty, old-school, fundamentally obsessed basketball mind who knows exactly how to take a team of absolute misfits, grind them down into a cohesive, terrifying defensive unit, and win tough, ugly games in the trenches. We have seen her do it before. We saw her do it with players like Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, taking a roster that many thought was disjointed and turning them into a formidable, playoff-hardened squad. But here is the undeniable truth that nobody in the mainstream sports media wants to admit on national television because they are too afraid of upsetting the fan bases. Stephanie White has not proven that she can win a championship-level basketball game with Caitlin Clark being the focal point of her rigid system. And conversely, Caitlin Clark has not proven that she has the patience, the defensive discipline, or the willingness to conform to play inside a Stephanie White system. It is a catastrophic clash of two massive egos, two brilliant but completely different basketball philosophies, and two distinct generations of basketball culture. On one hand, you have a head coach who demands absolute, unwavering defensive accountability from every single player on the roster, regardless of how many jerseys they sell. On the other hand, you have a generational offensive talent, a transcendent scorer and playmaker, who feels like she is being unfairly scapegoated, targeted, and harassed every single time the team misses a defensive rotation. And if you want Dre's personal opinion on the matter, I think Caitlin is 100% right to be pissed off. I really do. But I also think Stephanie White is doing exactly what she was hired to do, which is hold the line and establish a winning culture that doesn't cater to divas. If you go back and painfully watch the tape of that Portland game, a game the Fever ended up inexplicably losing 100-84, you can see the exact precise moment the wheels fell off the wagon. They were actually up early. The Fever had an 8-4 lead just 3.5 minutes into the first quarter. Things were clicking, the offense looked fluid, the ball was popping, and you thought, okay, Indiana's going to take care of business against an inferior roster. But then, right around the 6.5-minute mark of the very first quarter, Stephanie White makes a bizarre, mass substitution. She pulls Caitlin Clark. She pulls Aaliyah Boston. She pulls Lexi Hull. She essentially yanks the entire core of the team off the floor. And the very moment Caitlin goes to the bench, the Portland Fire go on an absolutely devastating, back-breaking 13-2 run. Portland is an expansion franchise, guys. Yes, they have scraped together some solid veteran pieces and hungry rookies, but you absolutely do not let an expansion team run you out of your own gym in the first quarter of a professional basketball game. So why did Stephanie do it? According to the post-game press conference transcripts, Stephanie stood up there with a straight face and claimed it was just their typical substitution pattern and that Aaliyah Boston was on a strict medical minutes restriction. She told reporters that they didn't want the young guard, Raven Johnson, out there trying to run the offense without another primary ball handler to relieve the pressure. But come on, man. Are we really buying that excuse? Are we really supposed to believe that you take out the greatest, most explosive offensive engine in the entire league just to stubbornly stick to a rigid pre-planned substitution schedule on a clipboard? When Caitlin finally gets subbed back into the game, the rhythm is completely gone. The momentum has violently shifted to the Portland sideline. The crowd is tense, the energy is flat, and when the defense inevitably starts collapsing under the weight of Portland's newfound confidence, who gets the blame? Caitlin Clark. I have been watching the sidelines all season, and I mean I have been really obsessively watching the sidelines, zooming in on the interactions. Caitlin Clark is absolutely freaked out right now because she is being systematically and purposely singled out on the defensive end of the floor by her own coaching staff. There was a specific, glaring possession in that game where Ty Harris completely blew a pick-and-roll coverage. She got caught ball watching, went under a screen when she was supposed to fight over it, and left her assignment wide open for an easy corner three. And what happened? Absolutely nothing. Crickets from the coaching staff. Complete silence from Stephanie White. KK Thompson will literally zone out for minutes at a time, go through massive, inexplicable spells in a game where she acts like she forgets she is actually a professional basketball player, and will just stand there flat-footed and watch as an opposing player crashes the glass and grabs an offensive rebound right in front of her face. Does Stephanie White scream at her? Nope. Does she get publicly humiliated during a timeout? Not a chance. Kelsey Mitchell, as much as we love her offense, plays less defense than an orange traffic cone on at least half of her possessions. Does she get pulled from the game and chewed out in front of thousands of fans? Absolutely not. But the absolute microsecond that Caitlin Clark gets caught on a brutal screen or makes a risky high-reward gamble in passing lanes that unfortunately results in a foul, Stephanie White pulls her to the sideline and treats her like she just committed a felony against the sport of basketball. It is not an uncommon occurrence for Stephanie White to arbitrarily decide that because a play broke down or because the ball ended up in the basket, it fundamentally must be Caitlin Clark's fault, even when Caitlin has been put in an impossible rotational position by her own teammates' mistakes. And as a player, especially an elite hyper-competitive player who expects to be treated with a certain level of superstar respect, that constant nagging grates on you. It completely eats away at your competitive soul. Now, let's talk about the ultimate slap in the face, the psychological warfare aspect of this entire debacle. Raven Johnson. This is where the story shifts from being just a standard, run-of-the-mill coach and player dispute to a straight-up, Emmy Award-winning Hollywood drama script. For those who don't remember, or for those who just started watching women's basketball yesterday and don't know the deep lore, let me take you back in time to 2023. We are at the Final Four. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes versus the undefeated powerhouse South Carolina Gamecocks. Raven Johnson is a young, hungry freshman guard for Dawn Staley's squad. She catches the ball wide open at the three-point line, and Caitlin Clark, the absolute ruthless, cold-blooded savage that she is, literally turns her back on her, waves her hand dismissively in the air, and gives Raven the ultimate Ben Simmons treatment on national television. She completely dared her to shoot it, blatantly telling the world, "This girl is not a threat to me." It was the ultimate viral form of athletic disrespect, and it broke the internet. According to deep dive interviews Raven did earlier this year reflecting on her career, that specific moment nearly broke her spirit entirely. She candidly admitted that she got relentlessly bashed, mocked, and cyberbullied by the internet for months. She literally stated she wanted to quit playing basketball, go home, and hide in a bubble of isolation, because the humiliation on the world's biggest stage was so intensely traumatizing. But Raven Johnson is an absolute dog. She didn't quit. She fought her way back, used that viral embarrassment as fuel, secured her ultimate revenge in the 2024 National Championship, and established herself as the undisputed SEC Defensive Player of the Year, proving to everyone she belonged. Fast forward through time to the 2026 WNBA Draft. The Indiana Fever front office, completely desperate to fix their absolutely atrocious, historically bad perimeter defense, decide to draft Raven Johnson with their first-round pick. Now, I want you to really deeply think about the psychological warfare currently happening inside that locker room right now. Stephanie White, a head coach who values hard-nosed defense, grit, and accountability above all other aspects of the game, now has a young guard on her roster who is an absolute menace at the point of attack, a player whose entire identity is forged in defensive redemption. Raven Johnson is everything Stephanie White historically wants in a basketball player. And when Caitlin Clark is out there struggling to keep her assignment in front of her, getting blown by on the perimeter, or throwing her hands up complaining to the referees instead of getting back in transition, who exactly does Stephanie White look to on the bench? The very same girl Caitlin publicly humiliated on national television 3 years ago, when Stephanie aggressively pointed and yelled, "Raven, you're in. Caitlin, you're out." It was not just a basketball substitution. It was a profound, calculated message. It was the head coach looking her global superstar dead in the eye and saying, "If you will not play defense for me, I have someone sitting right here who absolutely will, and I do not care one single bit about your history, your brand, or your hurt feelings." And let me tell you, as a fierce competitor, Caitlin Clark's blood had to be absolutely boiling at that exact moment. You can visually see the sheer frustration radiating off of her when she throws her hands up during that timeout. She's essentially communicating, "I'm putting my hands up. I'm playing the exact drop defense you asked for in the scouting report. The referees are calling bogus ticky-tack fouls on me, and you're still pulling me to punish me." But let's be completely real and objective for a second here. I am not going to sit behind this microphone and pretend that Caitlin Clark is completely innocent in this escalating feud. She shouldn't be snapping at her head coach during a live broadcast. You just do not do that in professional sports. It is an incredibly ugly, immature look that sends a terrible message to the rest of the roster. When a coach is chewing you out in a huddle, even if you firmly believe in your heart that it is entirely unjustified and that you are being unfairly blamed, as a professional making millions of dollars, you sometimes just have to eat the criticism. You have to swallow your pride, take it on the chin, nod your head, and address the actual nuances of the defensive breakdown in the film room behind closed doors the next day. Caitlin clearly is not wired that way. She wears her heart and her emotions on her sleeve for the whole world to see. And when she feels like she is being wronged or unjustly attacked, she immediately lets you know about it. It is not a positive leadership trait that she is openly and visibly arguing on the end of the bench while her team is getting blown out. You've got to be better than that as a franchise cornerstone. You have to project stability and leadership in the face of adversity. But the undeniable reality is, I know plenty of guys who played extremely high-level international and professional basketball, and it is a universally known, unspoken fact in the sports world. When a coach single-handedly and repeatedly picks on the best, most talented player on the roster in an attempt to set an artificial performative example for the rest of the role players, it almost always creates a toxic, deeply resentful environment. The coach always thinks they are masterfully establishing a tough culture. The star player always thinks they are being victimized and publicly embarrassed. That is exactly the dangerous, self-destructive cycle that is happening between Stephanie and Caitlin right now. They are caught in a vicious, unbreakable loop. There is a defensive breakdown on the floor. The coaching staff furiously looks around for a convenient scapegoat. Caitlin gets unfairly tagged with the blame. Caitlin snaps back defensively to protect her ego. And Stephanie decisively benches her to assert her ultimate dominance and control over the locker room. Rinse and repeat, over and over again. Now, naturally, the Indiana Fever's entire PR machine and crisis management team are working in absolute frantic overdrive right now, trying to desperately put out these massive fires before they consume the entire season. You have players like Aaliyah Boston, who is basically the absolute moral compass and saint of this franchise, going on every podcast and media outlet she can find, actively trying to play the role of the peacemaker. According to her most recent podcast quotes, she is out here laughing nervously, saying things like, "Oh, it's so funny to us, the fans and the media always have way more beef than the players actually do behind the scenes." She is trying her absolute hardest to convince everybody tuning in that Caitlin and Raven sat down like adults, hashed out their college history years ago, buried the hatchet, and are now the best of friends who completely support each other. And honestly, maybe they don't actually hate each other on a deeply personal level. Maybe they are cordial in the locker room. But that is completely missing the point. This current crisis isn't about Caitlin and Raven hating each other over a college basketball play from 2023. It is entirely about Stephanie White weaponizing Raven Johnson's presence to discipline, motivate, and punish Caitlin Clark. That is the core, undeniable issue tearing this team apart. And it is happening way too frequently for anyone to simply ignore or brush under the rug as competitive fire. This isn't just a one-time flare-up because they got blown out by 20 points on a frustrating road trip. This exact identical scenario of Caitlin getting singled out, reacting poorly, and getting benched has played out multiple times in the last week alone. Let me remind you, The Fever absolutely blew out this exact same Portland Fire team just a few days ago on their home court in Indiana. And now they travel on the road against a team playing on the second night of a back-to-back, and they get thoroughly embarrassed and run out of the building? That is a massive, flashing neon red flag that something is fundamentally broken within the spirit of this team. I see people in my comment section and all over basketball Twitter trying to sound smart by comparing this current mess to the legendary historic feud between Magic Johnson and Paul Westhead back in the early 1980s with the Los Angeles Lakers. They confidently say, "Oh, it's just history repeating itself. The generational superstar is going to flex her power, force ownership's hand, and get the coach fired, exactly just like Magic did to Westhead." But hold up. Stop right there. That historical comparison is wildly, fundamentally inaccurate, and I am going to break down exactly why you are wrong. If this was actually a mirror image of the Lakers situation, Magic Johnson fought with a head coach who was essentially an outsider, a guy who didn't have deep, entrenched historical ties to the organization's legacy. If you look closely at the Indiana Fever organization, firing Stephanie White is not just firing a basketball coach, it is declaring all-out war on your own franchise's history and identity. I really do not think the average fan truly comprehends the intricate, incestuous structure of the Fever's front office right now. That entire building, from the executive suites down to the scouting department, is run by people who are deeply, emotionally, and professionally linked to the 2012 WNBA championship run. That is the one and only championship banner hanging in the rafters that this organization has ever won. They cling to it like gold. And who exactly was sitting on that coaching staff during that magical 2012 run, grinding out wins? Stephanie White. Who was the head coach the last time this franchise was a legitimate, feared, sustained playoff threat before they plunged into a decade-long rebuild? Stephanie White. She and current executive Lynn Dunn are basically the undisputed godmothers of Indiana Fever basketball. They are the two winningest, most respected figures in the entire history of the building. If you fire Stephanie White to appease a frustrated young player, you are essentially telling the entire front office, the loyal alumni network, and the die-hard city of Indianapolis that you are perfectly willing to burn down every single shred of established, championship-winning culture just to keep Caitlin Clark happy. Now, back in 2024, when Caitlin was an incoming rookie, when the media hype train was moving at a million miles an hour, and when the franchise was desperate for relevance, yeah, making that harsh choice to side with the player would make total business sense. You protect the golden goose. But we are not in 2024 anymore. We are in the thick of the 2026 season. The dynamics have completely shifted. Think about the cold, hard business side of this equation. Because never forget, the WNBA is a multi-million-dollar corporate business first and foremost. The Indiana Fever organization has already heavily capitalized on the initial wave of Caitlin Clark mania. They have already sold out their season ticket packages for the foreseeable future. They have already secured the massive, record-breaking television ratings and the lucrative broadcasting deals that come with them. They have already locked in the massive corporate sponsorships and completely maximized the overall financial valuation of the franchise. The massive, undeniable financial boost that she was guaranteed to bring to the city has already been successfully deposited into the bank accounts of the ownership group. So purely from the front office's calculating perspective, they don't actually have to hold her hand and coddle her anymore. They have their money. Now they want to win basketball games their way. And right now, Stephanie White is standing in the executive offices, looking at the general manager dead in the eye and saying, "I cannot possibly run my defensive system. I cannot establish accountability if my starting point guard will not buy into the scheme. And I absolutely will not compromise the integrity of my locker room for one single player, no matter who she is." So if push absolutely comes to shove, and the ownership group is forced into a corner where they have to make a definitive choice between preserving the sacred legacy of their 2012 championship DNA or keeping an unhappy, visibly frustrated superstar who is constantly publicly fighting with the coaching staff, Dre's personal opinion? I honestly think they might just choose the coach. I know that sounds absolutely insane to the casual observer. You just do not trade a generational, once-in-a-lifetime offensive talent. It goes against every conventional rule of team building. But when a franchise player is completely mentally checked out, constantly throwing her hands up in disgust, and isolating herself on the bench, what realistic choice do you have as an organization? You can clearly see with your own two eyes that Stephanie White has completely lost Caitlin Clark's buy-in. The mutual respect might theoretically still exist on a very basic human level because they are both fierce competitors, but professionally, that bridge is currently engulfed in flames. Caitlin is absolutely exhausted and sick and tired of being the designated scapegoat for a deeply flawed defensive roster. And Stephanie is equally exhausted and tired of the continuous, back-breaking defensive lapses that cost them games. I genuinely, truly do not think Caitlin Clark finishes her current contract in an Indiana Fever uniform. The tension in that building is simply too thick to breathe. You cannot possibly operate a functioning, championship-contending basketball team when your best player and your head coach are screaming at each other on national television, followed immediately by the ultimate devastating disrespect of benching the global star for the very rookie she used to mock on the collegiate stage. The underlying psychology of that specific roster move by Stephanie White is absolutely brutal. It is a calculated, undeniable power play designed to break an ego. And Caitlin Clark, from everything we know about her relentless competitive nature, is simply not the type of player who is ever going to bow down and submit to a coach's power play. Just critically listen to the words coming out of Raven Johnson's mouth right there in that clip. She is fully unequivocally buying into the system. She is literally standing in front of the press saying, "I just do whatever it takes to win. I listen to Coach Steph." That is absolute, pure music to a defensive-minded coach's ears. That is exactly the type of soldier a coach wants to go to war with. Meanwhile, on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, you have Caitlin feeling completely isolated, unfairly targeted, and utterly unsupported. When you have a professional locker room that becomes deeply divided between the gritty players who are viewed as the coach's pets, the ones playing hard-nosed, mistake-free defense and following orders, and the mega superstars who genuinely feel they are carrying the entire offensive workload of the franchise while being constantly and unfairly criticized for every minor defensive mistake, the whole operation is inevitably going to implode. It is a tale as old as time in professional sports. And mark my words, Street Hoops family, it is rapidly imploding as we speak. We are watching the real-time, highly televised deterioration of what was universally supposed to be the WNBA's next great unstoppable dynasty. Instead of getting a legendary dynasty that rattles off multiple championships, we are getting a messy, dramatic, toxic reality TV show that belongs on Bravo instead of ESPN. So, I have to turn the question over to you guys, the real basketball minds. Who is actually fundamentally in the wrong here in this situation? Is it Stephanie White for being way too stubborn, way too rigid, and completely refusing to adapt or alter her defensive system to fit the unique skills of a transcendent, generational offensive talent? Or is it Caitlin Clark for acting entitled, refusing to take hard coaching, snapping back disrespectfully on the bench, and completely failing to improve her individual defensive effort to meet the standards of a professional championship system? Drop your honest, unfiltered thoughts in the comments section down below right now, because I know for a fact this specific topic is going to start an absolute civil war in the comments section, and I am here for all of the smoke. Do you genuinely think the Indiana Fever front office should pull the trigger, fire Stephanie White, and risk completely alienating their entire foundational alumni network and championship history just to pacify their star? Or do you realistically think they should start quietly taking phone calls and look into the unprecedented blockbuster move of trading Caitlin Clark away while her league-wide value is still completely astronomical? Let me hear your best trade packages and your hottest takes. Make sure you smash that like button until it breaks. Subscribe to the Street Hoops channel if you haven't joined the family already, and make absolutely sure you hit that notification bell so you never ever miss out on the realest, most in-depth basketball news and drama breakdowns on this entire platform. It has been your boy Dre Fiver, dropping the heavy truth, and I am officially out of here. Peace. Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White, Raven Johnson, Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark benched, Stephanie White argument, Caitlin Clark heated, Fever versus Portland, WNBA News, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, Ty Harris, Lexi Hull, Indiana Fever drama, Street Hoops, Dre Fiver, basketball drama, WNBA trade rumors, basketball analysis, WNBA 2026 season.